This is the UGASports call-in show without Paul Meharry. I'm Dayne Young filling in for him this week, but always with Jason Button, Ben Bachmann on this show. I think y'all have more fun here than I typically. Maybe the other things I do are more buttoned up. So maybe I should go grab the bourbon and let's
do it. I got my. Oh my God, I already forgot what. I'm in Montreal, everybody, and so my wife went and got some wine and she gave me a glass. So go get a bourbon.
So in a half hour, we're going to have a really good time with Jason if that wine glass keeps getting filled up. A lot of things to discuss here. If you want to join the UGASports call-in show, the link is in the description here on YouTube. We're going to focus on wide receivers and tight ends this week as we've been on this show going through, and well, I say we. You guys have been going through position groups as we are in the offseason at this point, leading up into spring. Receiver and tight end going to be an active one, so excited to chat that. But first, Arian Smith, I think since the last time that one of these shows happened, left, came back. He's going to be with Georgia, a valuable piece of depth there. Ben, overall, what does this say about Georgia's offensive line? What does it say about Georgia's coaches to be able to essentially re-recruit Arian Smith?
I think it's big because he could have started at Florida State or Miami like very easily because their lines are not very strong. He definitely would have been a starter there. So I think that says a lot about Georgia, the program itself at this point. But also I think it's really big for depth and the long term because I think me and Jason said, what was it, 2 weeks ago when he entered, that we said this, barring injury, wouldn't have an impact this year. But next year he would have been a starter. I think next year he's guaranteed to be a starter as long as he's on the roster. So this is really big for the long term in the offensive line because otherwise they would have really needed a big time recruit in this cycle because the long term depth at tackle, I wouldn't say is strong, but the long term depth at guard with guys like Willick and Fairchild and Wilson and pretty much everybody at guard is really strong. Tackle's kind of the issue outside of Ernest Green. So that says a lot about Stacy Searles to get a guy to basically be willing to sit one more year than be a starter at a top flight ACC program.
It's tremendous. Obviously, I think when you look at the future of tackle, it's a big boost to get him back into the fold. I would be really interested to know what happened on the Florida State visit, what the Georgia coaches were saying to him throughout the process. Really, to what changed, what went into him a week before G-Day. He decides that he's done. He's going to leave. We were kind of speculating a few things on the show. All of a sudden, the guy comes back, is clearly willing to sit one more year at least. And I don't know if he got some good advice in the long run. Don't know if he saw something at Florida State that kind of got into his mind and said, maybe this isn't a good idea. But great for Georgia because he will be a factor for sure next year. And who knows what can happen. He's one play away from being a starting tackle at Georgia this year.
You said you didn't know what happened on that Florida State visit. And from what I could tell from that 15-second video snippet, a lot of clapping, a lot of Mike Norvell doing that Les Miles clap, and that ended up being a little empty. But I think your last point is probably the most salient of like Georgia at tackle. One of those guys could get injured. I mean, it's really rare that you play as many games as a team like Georgia could play, getting up into 14, 15 games and have both of your starting tackles healthy the whole year. Warren McClendon's been remarkably healthy during his time at Georgia. Broderick Jones, not a season, right? But you saw Jamari Sawyer miss games last year where Jones had to come in and play. So I don't think this is a relegation to a backup role necessarily, although in, I guess, cases it could be. But I think Mills is going to be valuable for Georgia.
Oh, 100%, because your depth, I mean, McClendon's experience, but if he goes down, you might have to start a freshman who naturally a lot of people thought was a guard coming out of high school. And when you have to start a true freshman, I mean, Andrew Thomas is a rarity, and I'm never going to project anybody to be Andrew Thomas. So knowing that you don't have to play a potential freshman if injuries happen is something that's really strong. Plus his talent. His talent and ceiling is as high as anybody in the O-line room, but it's more of just, can he put in the work, and over time, whether it's a guy goes down or by mid-season, do they see something in to the point where they're like, okay, we have to play this guy?
Jason, I was chatting with a friend of mine last week, and he was just saying, well, why can't Mims just play guard? It seems like that's the spot where like there's some movement to be done. If he's that good, why couldn't he just play guard? Why isn't it that simple?
I mean, it's a different body type, a little bit of different technique. Some guys can do it. I think Isaiah Wynn was a good example. He could play every spot, all 5 spots on the line. Some guys can't make that tackle to guard transition and vice versa. Some guys don't have the body type to go from guard to tackle. Isaiah Wynn obviously could. He was a freak in that regard. It doesn't sound like, just based on what we know right now, that Amarius Mims can plug in at guard. He's a tackle right now. He's the body type for a tackle. I think the upside's there. It's kind of what Ben was alluding to. Is the drive, is the motivation going to be there to put in that work? It's no joke. I mean, you can be all world in high school, and then everybody is on your level for the most part when it comes to yeah, I don't want to say everybody's on your level at the college level, but the game is significantly a greater and more competitive. So is he willing to put in that extra effort, that extra time to get in there at tackle? Now I think the thing that if he proves that he's one of the 5 best or he's one of the top 2 tackles, maybe that opens up a spot. Maybe Warren McClendon is the one who slides over to guard. If Warren McClendon is still one of the top 5 offensive linemen on this roster. But as of right now, there's no indication that would suggest that Amarius Mims is guard. Some guys can do it. They have the flexibility. Some guys don't. Right now, it certainly seems that that's not the case for Mims.
Let's play a game real fast. According to the people I talk to, so I'm curious if y'all get the same things because we all talk to different people. There are 2 offensive linemen on the team that are probably could play all 5 spots, kind of like Jamari Sawyer did, but otherwise it's kind of specialized. I've been told it's 2. Can you guess those 2?
Ooh.
Which center makes the weird spot, right? Because I've been told Ernest Green could potentially play guard one day as well, like if he becomes one of the best 5. But he's not a center.
No.
Ooh. I would say Micah Morris.
Oh, that's not one that's come up. I don't know if he's done any snapping. I'll tell you, McClendon's one of them, and that's only because he's taken some snaps. I don't know if it's in an emergency role or just to see what if a best 5 came up of if Van Pran got injured. Like McClendon, I don't think that they're like super comfortable with this snapping, but it sounds like something they've worked on to a very basic extent.
He could be an emergency center. I don't know, man.
It helps just to go down the center chart.
I was going to go with Tate. I mean, a part of me was tempted to say Dayne's little brother, Warren Erickson, but I don't think he can play tackle.
Blasky is the other one that I've been talking
about. Blasky, okay.
Oh, yeah, that is a good one.
Yeah, because he's played center. I think he was the 3rd center.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right?
And then, if anything, probably his most natural position, if I had to guess, would be guard. And I think he's been repping at tackle more, especially with Amarius Mims leaving and coming back. They were trying to get him more reps in the spring there. So I don't know. Usually that does provide value if you can play all 5 positions because you can plug in anywhere and play earlier than maybe you would have otherwise.
Right.
Any more Amarius Mims commentary?
Just it's great for the program to hold on to a guy like that. I remember saying, I think one of the last things I said about him 2 weeks ago was, let him go, let him do his thing. Don't be angry. If he doesn't want to be here, he doesn't want to be here. I guess he changed his mind. He wants to be here. So, if you hated him then, I'm sure you love him now. So good for Georgia, good for Amarius Mims.
Yeah, the optics especially, because every time a 5-star leaves and he turns into something, everyone's like, oh, well, the coaching staff got this one wrong. Well, he technically hasn't left yet, so you can't say that.
Yeah, it's kind of a job interview for him at this point, right? Like, hey, man, like you're not draft eligible, but if you do things right, then you're set up for next year that it'll be a 9-month job interview to potentially – I mean, his body's a first-round talent. Now, if he gets there, like skill-wise and tape-wise, we'll have to see. The thing I've heard with him is just got to play low. He's so big, and in high school, he was just pushing people over with a lot of upper body strength, and it's hard to do that in college, and you can really get your feet taken out from under you.
Right.
All All right, well, let's move on to the topic of the week. Y'all been going through the position groups for Georgia, and Paul left me wide receiver and tight end, which is just plenty of fantastic fodder. So let's start with the wide receivers, and I'm not sure the format that y'all have done this. Let me just run down the scholarship guys. Y'all can tell me if I am an idiot and missed anybody. And then we'll just kind of talk about the position group from there, and then if we see any late exits in the portal, if we see any late entries in the portal. Starting on the wide receiver, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Dom Blaylock, Kearis Jackson, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, Arian Smith, Jackson Meeks, and then the freshman C.J. Smith and Denylon Morissette. There are some contributors that are walk-ons beyond that, but that's what I have as 9 scholarship receivers. I don't think I missed anybody there. When you start looking at just returning productivity, A.D. Mitchell obviously having the catch in the national championship game, Ladd McConkey having a fantastic season last year, Dom Blaylock and Kearis Jackson seemingly healthy for the first time in a bit. I mean, Kearis Jackson played a lot last year, but he was dinged up a lot too. And then Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint has some experience as well. Arian Smith has some experience, but not a lot of total plays because of his injuries. So, Jason, I guess I'll just start with you. When you look at Georgia's receiver position, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What do you think this can be for Georgia's offense?
You've got a lot of guys who can contribute. You got a lot of possession guys. You got some speed with Ladd McConkey. The one thing they're missing George Pickens. That would have been awesome if they had him the full season last year. The guy who can go beat a double team, can go do all the things that those NFL receivers can do. I don't see an NFL receiver, like a top tier number 1 NFL receiver on this roster. That's not a bad thing necessarily. I think they got a lot of number 2s, a lot of number 3s, maybe at the next level. I look at A.D. Mitchell. I look at even Ladd McConkey, how fast that guy is, and he's the guy. I say they got a lot of possession guys. He's not a possession guy yet. For whatever reason, he gets labeled that. We'll just leave it at that. Arian Smith, also a guy with speed. Dom Blaylock was the guy who came in that I thought had tremendous upside. Maybe he could work his way into a top 3, top 4 round draft pick. Obviously, the injuries have slowed him up. But I just see a lot of contributors. I can't remember if it was it might have been last week's show right after G-Day. I mentioned that this reminds me of the 2012 Georgia team where they had a lot of guys who ended up making the NFL. Some guy, Chris Conley, he's played for a long time. If not for injuries, Malcolm Mitchell would have probably played for a while. They got guys like that. They don't necessarily have that game breaker, but plenty of options for Stetson Bennett. And at the end of the day, we'll get to tight ends shortly. Brock Bowers is the go-to guy in this offense anyway. So good group, good solid group. Got no issue really. You're just missing that one guy on the outside that they could have had in Pickens last year. Now that he's gone,
I really like the 2 deep because I think every person on the roster has another receiver that complements them. Like I think A.D. Mitchell and Marcus Rosemy complement each other and can both play the X. I think you have 2 guys that you could split out and could just burn the corners. Arian Smith and Ladd McConkey have crazy speed. And then the slot, you have 2 guys who one's in year 4, one's in year 5 with Blaylock and Kearis, who both are really experienced. So I think you have a mix of like, okay, we have 2 guys who are similar that can do each spot that we need. Arik Gilbert could technically play receiver too, which is interesting. But I think the 2 guys I'm most intrigued about are Arian Smith and Denylon Morissette, because I'm interested to see if Morissette cracks the rotation, because I've heard good things about how he's done. And there always seems to be that freshman receiver, whether it was Pickens or Mitchell or Burton, who always seems to get on the field. So I'm interested to see if he cracks the field, because he's a really good route runner. He's got solid speed. So he's a really well-rounded receiver. And then Arian Smith, because I know Brent's always talked about there's one guy who can change the offense, and it's Arian Smith, because really, no matter if it's Stetson or Beck or Brock, no matter who the quarterback is on the field, Arian Smith changes everything, because he makes the safeties have to play 5 yards back, because you cannot play too close up or else he's going to just run past everybody. So like he changes the entire offense. So that's why I think if he can stay healthy, he totally changes Georgia. If Georgia gets 2 or 3 shots to him a game, if he's healthy, changes the offense a lot. And that's saying something, because I think this is as deep of a receiver and tight end group as Kirby's had at Georgia, which is why I think the offense could be even better this year than it was last year.
I like how you broke down the complementary receivers there, because I actually see C.J. Smith maybe being that for Arian Smith.
Mhm.
So that way, if Arian were to get hurt again, you actually have that like sprinter deep threat. Maybe he's got to learn some college football first. I'm not trying to throw him in there right away. But at least that potential is there. And I've been hearing great things about Jackson Meeks. Like, I think it's going to be a bit of a difficult thing for him to crack the depth chart because there's so much experience in front of him. But he's just a versatile guy, someone that really strong hands, making the catch. You saw a little bit of that in G-Day. And I think with him, it's going to be how good of a blocker are you? Because I saw Marcus Rosemary, Jackson gets on the field because you saw the blocks that he can make, especially down the stretch for Georgia last year.
And I like I want to also echo the breaking down the kind of the duos. When I covered the Falcons, they called them, Raheem Morris called them clones, where you had one guy who was like the next guy, and then you had your slot guy who was just like the slot guy. You had your X and your Z, but you had a backup in case of injury. It seems like a lot of NFL teams, a lot of college teams are definitely trying to make sure they have that so that they can have a full complement on their roster, so they're not lost if there's an injury. You have a complement that can step in and perform those roles. Kearis Jackson, to me, if you remember, it was 2 years ago. That was Stetson Bennett's guy in the slot at the beginning of, I guess it would have been the 2020 season. And then obviously when Stetson went out and JT came in, JT favored the outside a little more. So I'll be interested to see if that chemistry can come back, if Kearis Jackson is able to be healthy for the entire year and is able to, if he does end up kind of being that slot third down receiver that he has been, that he's done well during his time here. So I want to see if that chemistry can come back. But I think it's not. There's no holes. It's really just missing that one NFL guy. I should say one first round NFL guy. What that Georgia has historically, had at times throughout its program. But just a really good, solid group of receivers on this roster, in my opinion.
Pretty crazy to say that there's no holes. However, George Pickens is going to be potentially a first-round pick in the NFL. He's a guy that technically could have come back, though we all knew that he wasn't going to, and he shouldn't have. But then you also lose Jermaine Burton, right? I don't think we can have this conversation in whole without discussing Burton's departure and what that leaves behind. Ben, I'd said for a while that I thought even if Burton would have come back, he wouldn't have been the best receiver on the roster. And so I think that obviously that's still the case now, that they have receivers better than Jermaine Burton. But overall, I think a lot of Georgia fans are kind of excited to see what Georgia has, and obviously doing the comparison to what Burton's going to do in Alabama.
Well, I think everyone already assumes that Burton at Alabama, because they throw the ball so much, it's all about just attempts, because their rushing offense is lower, and their defense isn't as good, which is not good, but that also means the offense is on the field faster because their defense being scored on fast. So that's a big part of like the give or take when people talk about, I want the flashy offense and the receiver numbers that people don't really talk about much. So when I look at Burton leaving, I would agree with you, because I think A.D. Mitchell is going to develop arguably into the best receiver on the team. You already see the flashes, and he did that as a freshman where he didn't play his senior year of high school. He was an early enrollee already. I mean, I think it was JT and Stetson both said like he was like one of the first guys there, like when they were doing the 7-on-7s in the winter and stuff like that. He was like the first guy there every time. So you already see it with him that he's really developing into a really good receiver. He just needs to be more consistent with catching. I remember in the Alabama game, he was really good, but in the previous games, he dropped a lot of easy little 10-yard passes that he can't have. But I think if he improves his consistency there, I think he could be the best receiver on the team. I think Arian Smith, like I said earlier, could be the most important, because Alabama, all their receivers that have been elite are the same. They're all going to stretch the field because they're so fast. All of them ran like in the mid 4.4s or better, and they all were like under 6'2". So when you look at that, like Arian Smith is kind of like a Bama receiver in the fast that he stretches the field. So I think those two are kind of going to be the most important if they're healthy. And then Ladd McConkey, they use him a lot in the screen game. I remember Jermaine Burton, his freshman year, remember they threw him a bunch of screens. Last year, I don't think they threw him a single one. So like you could tell with these other receivers, they're using them in different ways that I think you would love to still have Jermaine Burton, but I would actually agree with you that, yeah, I don't think he would be the best one, because one, they don't use them like that. And two, I think these other guys who specialize in certain areas are more important to the offense.
It really just is another testament to the recruiting that has happened. We've talked about this with other positions too. It's, Kirby's been here since 16. In those the first half of his tenure, he really ramped up who was playing, the starters. And then your second team was solid. Then behind that, it was a drop off. There's really no drop off at a lot of these positions anymore. There's been enough time to kind of stockpile. You can afford to lose Jermaine Burton and George Pickens, and that's insane. Having been, having grown up in Georgia, having gone to Georgia, having covered Georgia, I've never seen the depth at these positions. It's why it's the easiest statement of the night. It's why you win a national championship. You have the best talent on the roster in the country, on your roster in the country is what I'm trying to say. And so, receivers no different. We talked about 9 guys, and I think when it comes to those first 6, you're going to see this ball being distributed quite a bit. I don't think you get a 1,000-yard receiver out of any of these guys. I think Brock Bowers is your best bet again, as I alluded to earlier. He's going to be the number 1 option in this offense. But you just have you can spread the ball out, and you have a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things. And this offense should be way more opened up, I think, with going into this offense with Stetson Bennett at quarterback as the surefire starter. We all know he was able to get a lot of reps this spring. It played G-Day all the way through, a lot more familiar, asserting himself more as a leader. That's going to open things up for this passing game. And we've talked about it before, given the losses on defense, they're going to have to pass the ball more. And so I think this receiving core, a lot of quality guys who can get the job done in different ways. Really like this group a lot. I don't think I can state that enough.
Does Georgia bring in someone from the portal at wide receiver in the next few weeks?
I would venture to say yes. I would say so, because I think they have the scholarship numbers. Now, Kirby's never going to reveal his numbers, because we've always been talking about, how many guys have to leave. And now we're hearing, there might not be that many because some are gray shirt or they're walking on or something. But I definitely believe they need some more, like another top end guy who could take the top off the defense, who's experienced, because they have the ability to take one. You have 3 scholarships that you can take players in, like 3 or 4, and you're going to lose them if you don't take them. And receiver's probably one of the positions on offense that you would use it on. So I feel like they have to take portal players. I know we'll probably get into that in the next week or so, but I think by default, that's one of the positions you kind of have to take.
I don't know if my opinion, I don't know if they have to take one, but they can be selective. And if the right guy's there, and it's a guy who is that an upper level guy who you know is going to contribute, I think you go after him. It's the one that number 1 X guy who can be first round, second round. I don't know if that guy is going to show up in the portal or not. Jameson Williams obviously did for Alabama. But if that kind of guy comes through and you have a chance, I think you go for it if you're Georgia, because that's at that position, that's the one thing you're missing.
I think it's smart just for a depth piece, because I'm looking at these 9 guys and I'm seeing 3 that have a history of pretty severe injuries. Obviously Blaylock, but even Roseme's broken leg against Florida. He was fine last year, but that was still a serious injury that you account for. Arian Smith's been dinged up a lot too. And so I look at this group and I'm like, you're 2 injuries away from being pretty thin at that position, and not having the walk-on experience. Jalen Johnson played a lot for Georgia as a walk-on at receiver, and he's not there anymore. I think they have some other guys that could play. I think you'll see some of those walk-ons as special teams contributors too. But just as a depth piece at receiver, I do think that they bring someone in, or at minimum have some other spot on the team that gets a couple reps there in case it got dicey. They do have that from the secondary if you had to flip someone over, but I know they don't like to do that if they don't have to. Let's wrap the receiver portion of this with another game of mine. So this is kind of high school superlative season, so in the yearbooks. So I'm just going to give you a quick description or a one word, and I want you to tell me which receiver best personifies this for Georgia. So you've got your group of 9 on scholarship. Who is the best route runner?
Ooh. I was gonna say Cole Spear for fun, so we didn't talk about him.
I forgot about Spear. I feel bad about that. Whoops. You're right.
I would probably just go with AD Mitchell because I've seen him run a lot of hitches and vertical route. I've seen him run a different route combination, so I'm just going to go with him as a safe pick.
Yeah, I like him too. I like Kyrus Jackson. I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll just go Kyrus Jackson.
I think I'm going to go AD, and it's only because I forget which game it was. Maybe you can help me, Ben. But he's in the red zone 1-on-1, and it's like a straight up pro move. I think it was like 3 yards. He does the shake, the shimmy to the inside, and a quick release to the outside, and the ball was there for him. I want to say maybe Tennessee, but I really don't remember.
Because I remember he had a nice double move against South Carolina. That was really nice.
That may be the no, I don't think that's the one I'm thinking. He has plenty, so I guess that's reason enough. Which of Georgia's receivers has the best catch radius? Would have been Pickens for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say who right now. That's the thing. They don't have that.
Coming out of high school, I like Marcus Rosemy. I really liked Rosemy's catch radius coming out of high school.
You tend to go with the bigger guys for catch radius, but that's not always the case. Because I think catch radius, I think like plucking it out of the air across the middle, who does that the best?
Plucking it out of over the middle? And maybe
not necessarily over the middle, but who plucks the ball out of the air when it's not necessarily the best throw?
Honestly, AD Mitchell probably.
Yeah.
If you threw a Reek in there, I would probably say Reek.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, he's a tight end right now, but
best blocking wide receiver.
Oh, I'm just gonna go Rosemy because of the championship game. Like I've seen big blocks out of him.
Yeah, I'm going Rosemy too.
Best yards after the catch.
McConkey.
100%.
Oh, yeah. I was going to go that, or I was going to go Kieris. I've seen Kieris on some of those screens break big gains.
And they still run him on that jet sweep a lot too.
Yeah.
This is easy, I think, but best deep shot.
Oh, it's Arian.
Yeah.
Possession receiver, which, as you said, Jason, stereotypically white receiver. People are going to say McConkey.
He's not, but he's not.
He's not.
I forget was it the Vanderbilt game, and they were like, "Oh man, we're getting a lot of McConkey. He's the possession guy." What the?
No, he's not at all. I think the best possession receiver is probably Kieris.
Oh yeah, 100% out of the slot.
Yes, yeah. I agree with that.
This is a weird one. Who's your third down bailout guy? Which I guess that's what I thought Pickens was. At like 3rd and 8, you're going to throw it to a guy who.
Blaylock. I'm going with Blaylock if he's healthy. Over the middle, I just feel like he's easy yards.
Yeah, probably if he's healthy. Yeah, I'd say just knowing what we know, I'd go Kyrus again just because he's your slot guy. If you're going with a receiver, I'd go with him.
I'll go Cole.
I like Blaylock too.
I'll go Cole Spear just because I disrespected him by not including him on the list. So thank you, Ben. Finally, which Georgia receiver will have the most touchdowns this season? Again, it'll be probably behind 2 tight ends, frankly. But which receiver will have the most touchdowns?
Oh man,
I'm tempted not to go Mitchell, even though I feel like he's the obvious answer.
I'm going
because I was not. Was he the leader receiver this year for touchdowns?
I think he had 5. Is that right?
Was it Burton or was it Mitchell who had more touchdowns this year?
I will go confirm on the stats while you guys.
Because Burton had a lot of one-play touchdowns, but Mitchell I feel like was more like.
McConkey had 5. Burton had 5. AD Mitchell had 4. So of the returnees at receiver, McConkey would be the leader right now.
Oh. Complicated.
I'm just gonna roll again and go Kyrus Jackson. Why not? He stays healthy.
No, I'm gonna go with Blaylock from last time because I think if he's playing, I think in the red zone, I think he can be really effective. It should be Washington if they're in the red zone a lot. It's my one pick of the offense. They need to throw him the ball in the red zone.
You could make the argument. What if they don't get to the red zone because they've just been throwing it to Arian Smith every day?
That's true.
He ends up the guy 14, 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, he'll end up having if he had 14 touchdowns, he's going to have 15 catches. It's going to be that kind of year. Let's move over to tight end. Overall, I agree. Georgia's pretty stacked at receiver and a lot of different kinds of players, which I think is helpful. not as stacked as they are at tight end. This is after spring, a group that is getting praise for, is that the best tight end group in the history of college football, which is hyperbolic at this point. And I started thinking, though, and I'm like, pretty sure Winslow and Shockey were on the same Miami team. So at least in recent memory, that's where my brain goes to. But then you think of Alabama had some pretty awesome ones. Who was it? They had Irv Smith as the backup for
OJ Howard.
OJ Howard.
Yeah, Howard.
That's a
right.
solid group, but that's not better than what Georgia has now.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So scholarship tight ends, 6 on the roster with Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, Arik Gilbert, Brett Seether, Rylan Godey, and Oscar Delp. Frankly, let's start with the portal discussion. I don't know that you'll see anyone come in, but I think you're going to see a guy leave.
Yes, I'm with you. There's just too many guys. I won't be surprised to see one leave. I mean, how does everybody get on the field? I mean, Darnell Washington is your guy you're trying to convince, right? I mean, all the rumors and all the stuff about him. But, at the end of the day, if Washington stays, I mean, your top 3 tight ends. I don't know. I guess the Miami tight ends you mentioned, Winslow and Shockey, that would be the best comparison that you could probably make in terms of tight ends that you've seen in one room at the college level at one time. It's that's really remarkable. So when you get down below those top 3, especially Oscar Delp, I kind of expect him to be the number 4 when it's all said and done this year. You get to the next that next group. Yeah, could possibly see one go.
I think they could have 4 of like the top 6 or 7 tight ends in college football this year. I've never seen anything like that, because you look, Bowers to me is the best outside of, who's the guy at Notre Dame? Michael Mayer's his name. Like
Mayer,
yeah, he's a pretty good tight end, but outside of that, I can't think of any household tight ends. And that's no knock at a guy. I just can't off the top of my head. So I look and I say you have Bowers, who's the best tight end in the country, who is an underrated blocker, and obviously you just don't want to have a tight end who's that fast, who's catching screen passes and running past people and is tearing people up deep down the field over the middle. It's just absurd what he is. And then Washington, a guy who's close to 6'8", 260, probably the best run blocking tight end. I think Pro Football Focus graded Bowers and Washington the 2 best tight ends last year. You had Arik Gilbert, who's like the freshman All-American tight end his 1 year at LSU. And then Oscar Delp was arguably an unborn high school tight end who had close to 100 yards a G-Day. Like, that's absurd that they have that. I'm interested to see if they just run like 4 tight ends and a running back. Like they might do that, and just our wide receiver discussion might be like, okay, occasional deep shot to Arian and nobody else. Like that might be what they can run, which is absurd. And I think it's going to be Bowers and Gilbert, assuming if Gilbert stays at tight end, I assume they're going to be the 2 main guys. Washington, they can probably use him on some short passes and in the red zone. And then Delp could be a guy who, for depth, who might be able to come in if they ever wanted to rotate. So that gives them so many options.
That's the thing.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll just say that, when you look at, to me, when you look at Bowers, he's interchangeable. Like you could feasibly put him at the X, and he can
running back.
Yeah, you can do so many things with him all across the formation, to where going to your point about injuries. Like if you have enough injuries at receiver, or if you have 2 or 3 injuries, like you can make up some of those losses with the tight ends. Gilbert can basically play receiver. Bowers can step in and play traditional receiver role. It's an embarrassment of riches right now at the entire pass catching group right now.
When Ben said that he could not think of like tight ends in college football that really have notoriety right now, I just did a quick Google search while we were chatting, and Brock Bowers, this is a PFF article ranking the top 10 returning tight ends. 2 Georgia guys on here with Bowers and Gilbert. Utah also had 2 at the top 10 on this PFF list. Mayer was the number 2. This did not have Darnell Washington featured on it, which is very short-sighted in my opinion. But the other guys just in the top 5, Brant Kuthi from Utah and Jaheim Bell from South Carolina.
Okay.
So we'll see. None of those are Bowers. Bowers is by far the best tight end in college football. Overall with this group, though, I mean, you start thinking like just the red zone, things you can do with these guys. Bowers and Washington have been on those red zone sets. And how does Gilbert fit into what's already there?
I mean, we already saw how he was used to G-Day. I mean, you could just use him across the middle. I mean, if you put I think they're going to run in 2 tight ends at least a lot this year. It would be hard not to, because I think with Washington, you can use him as a red zone passing threat and as a really good run blocker. So that's really good that you have a red zone threat and probably the best blocking tight end, like I said, in college football. But then in the red zone, like Gilbert, you can use him over the middle and he can create mismatches. Plus, you could they were splitting them out and having kind of like with George Pickens when they would split him out and do the fade in the red zone. Like they tried doing that with Gilbert, and that's probably what they're going to do with him. And then with Bowers, I remember they did the fade with him versus Georgia Tech. So they're going to run a lot of fades and run those guys over the middle, probably on some of those mesh routes. And I think they're just going to abuse linebackers. It's going to be abuse against other teams.
And I think the big thing with this tight end group is because they go 4 deep at being able to catch the ball, whether it's red zone going deep, intermediate, third down safety net. Defenses aren't going to know. You're not going to have a 2 tight end set or a 3 tight end set, and the defenses can't play the run primarily. It's just the versatility at the group is so key when it comes to pre-snap preparation or pre-snap, fooling the opponent in that regard. So that to me is where this tight end group can play a huge advantage when it comes to being able to keep defenses on their heels.
I will say overall, yes, this depth at tight end is just ridiculous for this upcoming season. And that's even it's 6 guys and we said 1 might be transferring, which if that were to happen, it'd be like Seether or Goody based on what we're saying. If Washington stays, which it sounds like, at least what I hear in my circles, that Washington will end up staying. But that means Washington and Gilbert are doing their NFL job interview for the next 9 months. And we'll both be gone in the process for next spring. All of a sudden, if you did lose Seether or Goody, your depth at tight end is tested immediately going into next year because half of these guys will be gone before the next season. So if you're looking at future roster management things, you're like, all right, Bowers is there for 1 more year after this one. And then beyond that, Delt better be ready. And then you're getting into Pierce Spurlin and the next wave of the guys, right?
Yeah, the number 1 tight end in 24, Landon Thomas, he's probably going to end up at Georgia. I mean, he told me straight up that he was very close to committing the last time he was even on campus. And then at 23, you have Lawson Lucky already committed. And then they're trying for Duncan Robinson, who's the top tight end, who might be a first-round pick in baseball. So they're shooting at him. So it's kind of absurd that Todd Hartley gets a top 2 tight end every year and usually gets them early and just gets to sit. I've not seen a guy recruit one position so well in my life. So they're set. It's just they're going to be very young. But they're going to be talented. They're still going to be the most talented tight end room every year. It's just they're going to be very young some years.
Yeah, they get Brock Bowers back for another year. So it doesn't matter to me. I mean, you get Brock Bowers back next year, and then even though you lose Washington and Gilbert, you have him, you have Delt, and I mean, hell, Bowers was a freshman. I mean, this is a position where not always does a guy come in and play right away, but when you have a guy like Bowers, and this is obviously assuming that he stays injury-free. I mean, right now, if Bowers goes down, they are very fortunate at tight end to where they have other guys who can step up. Yes, I agree. You lose those 2 guys, Bowers goes down, you are in some trouble. But assuming he stays healthy in 2023, just think. I shudder to think what he could be then based on what we saw last year. So I think no matter what, and maybe it's just the optimist in me. I think they're in good hands at this position for many years to come, barring complete disaster of injuries and decommitments and so forth.
Look, I'm just filling in for Paul. I'm trying to stir the pot a little bit, see if I can find a thing here. We're all just sitting there talking in platitudes about these tight ends, and I try to sneak in something in there that's
I know.
Well, here's the thing to watch for, trying to be Paul, and y'all shot me down. So good job.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Dane.
I'm going to text Paul later and be like, they were mean to me. I was just trying to live up to your name, Paul.
Paul can be quite dumb on here with some of his takes, Dane. I don't think you said anything bad today, so Definitely an upgrade.
So I need to come up with some worse takes. Is that what you're saying? I mean, I completely left off
Paul
a wide
was trying
receiver.
to argue the Georgia fan opinion about why Arch Manning, why they shouldn't potentially take him. I remember that one day. I was like,
whoa. Oh, yeah, that was pretty bad.
I was like, Paul, like there's sometimes where Paul's like, I got to play devil's advocate on here, but I'm like, sometimes Paul, that's bad. That's just bad, Paul. Like, what are you doing?
I mean, my current take that I'm sitting on is that like, obviously a national championship is fun and interesting, but as a whole, like, watching Georgia football is not as much fun as watching like Ole Miss football, because like fourth quarters are not they're not dramatic at all. So in terms of like, the best thing as a fan is like to be in a close game every week but always win, right?
All right, it depends.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
If you're a fan of the game, yes, but if you're a fan of a team, like you don't want that heart. You don't want those heart palpitations.
But splash plays, like that Arkansas Ole Miss game was fun. That last was one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen in my life, but that was fun to watch.
I guess I'll put it this way. If Georgia gets up 14 in any game against not Alabama or not Ohio State, I'm pretty much thinking it's over because just talent-wise, I think it's hard for any team, unless they have a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, to come back against Georgia. And I don't think that with Ole Miss. I literally think 70 teams in the country can score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss can do that to a lot of teams too.
Yeah, so that's why, like, if you're not an Ole Miss fan, they are the most fun team to watch because you don't care if they lose, but it's chaos every week.
I think LSU is going to be like that this year too.
Yeah.
That's actually my sleeper take. Dayne brought up probably one of the best discussions he's brought up today about Georgia rivals, which I would have a take on that. I think LSU and A&M is going to be one of the bigger SEC rivals over the next 5 to 10 years.
So that on the dog vent, I posted this. I was talking to one of the students. I work at Grady College at UGA, and I was talking to one of the students in the sports media program, and he was telling me that Georgia's biggest rival is Alabama. And I'm like, whoa. And like in the state that I grew up in, where it's like, everyone where I grew up thinks that Florida's the devil. And then I worked in Columbus and they think Auburn's the devil. If you're in Chattanooga, you think Tennessee's the devil. And it's like, they don't even play Alabama every year. And he's like, yeah, but that's the only team that beats Georgia. And I'm like, I can tell you've been in college for 2 years.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing what it's come to. When I was in college, it was like you, Dayne, it was 100% Florida. I mean, because I think when I was growing up, Tech was still somewhat relevant, and but then when Paul Johnson got there, it's just like Tech became so irrelevant that it almost seemed like it was disinterested among Georgia. That game was the 2 years Paul Johnson won. It was just like a complete. One was his first year, I remember, but then after that, there was the second one he won. I think it was.
That was Pooch kicking.
It was Kirby's first year. It was Kirby's first year, right? Yeah, it was Kirby's first year.
Kirby's first year they lost.
And it was just complete. It was a complete shock. It was like, what happened? There was one other time, right? It was the stupid.
I'm thinking the Pooch kick and Harrison Butker.
Harrison Butker game, and then the two Sony and Nick both fumbled. Yeah, it was that game too. So it was 3 games. Yeah, and so it was just a complete shock when they won. So like for me, it was Florida, not to mention the 90s Florida owned the rivalry. So it was
all 3 of those Tech wins happened in Sanford Stadium too. None of those.
I know. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia Tech fans just don't exist hardly anymore. Maybe you guys see them, more.
I really don't.
They are non-existent. Like the stadium is just all Georgia fans whenever they put on the road there. So it's kind of hard. Like it's still to a lot of people a rivalry because the in-state feel to it, and that was such a heated rivalry. I mean, the rivalry's old-fashioned hate. Like that's probably the best rivalry name, in my opinion. But I think Tennessee is also one that I think is really underrated. Like I think Tennessee would be a bigger rival than Bama. Now going forward, if Bama and the SEC expansion joins the East, or if they're in a pod together, Georgia and Bama, I think that could be the biggest college rivalry on the national media.
It'll change for sure.
Build that as the biggest rivalry would be Georgia and Bama if they had to play every year. I definitely could see that.
100%.
I think it's always going to be Florida, and Georgia's mind. It always is going to be Florida, in my opinion.
I don't see.
I don't know. I don't know. If Georgia and Bama play every year, like you said, if somehow, some way that happens, and not much changes on the landscape where Georgia and Bama are dominating college football, I mean, I think that's going to surpass it. as long as they don't play every year in the regular season, it's not really a rivalry to me yet. It's just you just got two teams playing in the SEC championship and possibly in the playoff.
With expansion coming, I just don't see a way that Georgia and Bama would play every year unless it really is like they just meet up in Atlanta every year because, and the SEC championship should probably be eliminated one day once they get the conference deal going, but it's not going to because of money. And it's such a big game for the conference. So that's another discussion for another day. Let's wrap with a little NFL draft talk here because it is the week of the draft now coming up on Thursday. How many Georgia guys do you think will be in the first round? It looks like anywhere between 4 and, I guess, in a perfect world, 7, which would just be nuts.
Oof. Yeah, there's no way they get 7.
I think 3 to 7's the range. 7's the dream scenario.
I mean, 7 is Scene and Pickens and
Quay Walker
jumping up there.
And then the 4 would be obviously Dean, Wyatt, Davis, and Trayvon.
Yeah.
I think the biggest discussion is, does Trayvon go first? That would be interesting. See how that happens.
I doubt it, but it could happen.
The Jaguars
GM
is big on taking guys who are just athletic specimens over guys he's passed on J.J. Watt. He's passed on both Watt brothers. He's passed on a lot of guys. I think one of the Bosa's maybe to take guys with higher athletic ceiling. So by his track record, he would take Trayvon, and there's buzz about it. My gut's telling me it's going to be Hutchinson, but I'm really intrigued to see if he goes 1 this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting the 3 no matter what. You're getting Trayvon. He could go 1 or 2. He's not falling out of the top 5 at this point, from what it sounds like. Maybe not top 3. Then you got the 2 big D tackles and Jordan Davis and Wyatt. And then I think Scene is your guy. I think they get 4 best case scenario, 3 for sure. I just don't see them getting 5, 6, and 7.
You think Nakobe Dean's falling out of the first round?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
I go
unfortunately.
5. If you had to, I'd go bold and I'd go 5. I'd throw the same 4 you had, and I'd throw Dean in there because I just think some team has to take him.
I don't know what either we're all getting played or there's something out there because I love the way the guy plays, but
it's frustrating to me, right? Yeah. Because if you just look at it on tape, I would tell you Nakobe Dean was a better player at Georgia than Trayvon Walker was as a whole. In terms of impacting the defense more.
Yeah.
I thought Nakobe Dean just jumped off the film more. But obviously you start combining the potential and the athleticism. Trayvon Walker is a freak in a lot of ways. And Nakobe Dean isn't in those same ways. But, I guess I look at it and I say, what has Nakobe Dean done since, helping win the national championship to drop essentially, this would be 20 spots because he was being
unless it's all a smokescreen and at the end of the day there's a team in the back half of the first round that thinks it gets a hell of a deal by being able to take him there instead of the first half of the first round.
It's not character stuff with that guy,
right? Exactly.
Georgia.
So that's the only thing I can think of. But unless he just didn't test or interview or whatever it was well with scouts during the process, it is wild to see his fall. And but yeah, based on what we've seen, I don't. It sucks for him, but hey, second, third round, there's worse things in life, I guess. They'll still get drafted at least.
Well, the 2 things I'm interested about is 1, how many total picks? Because if Jay Carmada gets picked, that Georgia will get 14. The record is 14. So they will tie the record if he gets picked. Because the other is John Fitzpatrick, which Brent has his heart on that he gets drafted. I'm still going to say it doesn't happen. But if he does and Carmada gets drafted, they'll get 15. Adam Anderson, if some team takes a chance late, that's another one that could get them to 15, assuming the punter gets drafted. But the other thing that I was looking at was Jamari Sawyer. That's the one thing where it's tough because a part of me would take Trayvon over Aiden Hutchinson because I think Hutchinson's maxed out and I would go with the ceiling with Walker. But then you look on the flip side, I'm well, Jamari Sawyer is one of the guys I've been beating on the table about because to me it's about the medical. Because if his medical, which I think Dayne's brought up to me throughout the season, was Jamari's medical because he did have injuries. There were concerns about that if you think Jamari can be healthy and you don't think the medical's bad, I don't know why he can't be at least a second round pick. Because if you're a left tackle for a national championship team, and you don't allow a sack And his pressure rate over the last 2 years has been the best in college football, according to PFF. Like he's allowed like 0.6% or something like that pressures per snap. And this guy's not even going to be a second round pick. Like I'm confused by that because I think as a guard at the next level, his IQ and leadership and ability and consistency as a blocker is so exceptional that I think he's an easy second round pick for a team that needs a guard. I don't understand the hate for him. Some people I've seen say he's like the 9th best guard in the draft. I don't get that at all. It makes no sense to me.
Well, to further your point, he's a guy who can play all 5. So if he needs to play tackle, he can. I mean, again, I think when Isaiah Wynn was coming out, there was a lot of speculation during the pre-draft that he would be a guard because of his size, and he's been a tackle. No, I do think obviously that Sawyer will be a guard at the next level. But yeah, I'm with you. It is interesting to see. This is a guy who has the experience. He's been solid his whole career at Georgia. So second round seems to be a good. It seems to be a solid spot for him. I don't think he falls past the 3rd. But interesting that, like you said, he's not getting enough love, especially with his versatility to play multiple spots at the next level.
Should I test out a trash take here? Because I see a window. If Trayvon Walker gets drafted at the number 1 overall pick, and this is the anti-Georgia show take, I guess, that will be evidence to me that the NFL says that Georgia misused Trayvon Walker. And that
I don't think that's a trash take.
Yeah, I don't think it's a trash take.
But I also I would disagree. I think we talked about a little bit about this last week. He after G-Day, because it's hard to argue with with the national championship team and coach. Like they clearly were doing something right, coaching, putting players out there doing their thing and all that. But yeah, Trayvon Walker. But yeah, I get it. Like you didn't feature Trayvon Walker in this defense. What were you doing if he's the number 1 overall pick? Like I get what you're saying. So I don't think it's trash, but I understand.
well, I think Georgia's defense puts like Adam Anderson, who, man, that's a sad situation, and Nolan Smith. They really wanted those outside linebackers to be the guys who got all the sacks. Because like Azeez Ojulari led the SEC in sacks. And he had the production, yet he was a second-round pick. Well, a part of it was like a medical from high school when he tore his like ACL or something. Is what people said brought him back. But like that guy led the SEC in sacks and went second round, and Trayvon Walker's going first pick. So like I'm confused here with the NFL, which is why I think a lot of people, like I've always said this, like Darnell Washington, if he gets 400 yards, given that tight ends isn't a valuable thing, he could be a second round pick next year, which is basically a starting tight end instantly. And he's going to get big time money, which is ideal for a tight end. He doesn't need big production because he's 6'8", 260. If he runs a good 40, people are going to be like, oh, he's a freak. So like that's always going to be the thing where I'm confused with the NFL is, okay, do you look at this guy and how he was used or, what he did at the combine, or is it really the production? Because based off Georgia, if you're an athletic freak, you're going to be picked number 1. But if you lead the entire conference in sacks, you're going to be a second round pick. I'm just really confused here because that narrative, it can go so many ways. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah. There's a lot of over-evaluation done in the NFL too. So sometimes, you get guys who are evaluated as freaks, but and therefore the potential. Although I'll say the guy from Penn State, Owe, who the Ravens got, did not have a great senior year. When he had like 0 sacks or 1 sack or something at Penn State. No sacks, yeah.
And they picked him over Ojulari.
Yes, and he was great. Well, I thought he was pretty good for as a rookie. He was obviously a decent pass rusher, and so that stuff happens. That's an example of maybe a team. There's still time to determine if they got that pick right, but a lot of times teams evaluate on these tangibles that they can sometimes over-evaluate and put too much stock in them and not rely on the tape and the production and the numbers. And so there is obviously a fine line. The best teams historically get that right. The Jaguars are not one of the best teams. I'm actually hoping that for Trayvon Walker's sake that he does not become the number 1 overall pick, because I wish nobody, just out of the kindness in my heart, that they go to Jacksonville to play football.
But you have Detroit and Houston 2 and 3, and they're god awful as well. And then you have the Jets, and then you have
Detroit. So Houston's
those top 5 picks. They stay like the Falcons.
Yeah, but they're not Jacksonville.
But the Falcons might be one of the better places to go. And I know a lot.
I wouldn't even say that.
Just check our message boards. Yeah. I mean, Falcons fans complain about everything because it seems like everything is going bad down there, and it's a better situation than like all the top 5, which is
that's.
With Jacksonville, you're going to see how much Doug Peterson actually decides anything, because like based on kind of how he did things at Philly and then even back in his Andy Reid days, like he's going to want to go Evan Neal, right? And just like, let me get something in my offense to make that work better. But then if someone above him is like, actually go with one of the best, athletes in the draft, and we're going to go with an edge rusher, I think you're going to really see what Jacksonville's trying to do immediately. Because, I mean, they need everything other, you're trying to make Trevor Lawrence look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all the top 9 teams need everything, it seems like, in this draft. And it's kind of a crapshoot draft. So.
And I'm interested. This is my favorite NFL draft tradition, is to see which terrible teams really overpick on quarterbacks. And this year is the perfect year for it, because I think maximum 2 quarterbacks should be taken in the first round, maybe only 1, and watch it end up being like 5.
It's probably, I was gonna say, it's probably gonna be 4 or 5, and you're just gonna see in the back half of the draft, you're gonna see some trades probably and some just stupid picks. It's gonna be awesome.
If the Panthers take Pickett, I mean, we're gonna be seeing Matt Rule, Florida State coach next year. I'm talking about bold prediction. I think Matt Rule, if he takes Kenny Pickett, will be a college head coach next year.
I mean, if Pickett shouldn't be a first-round pick, Sam Howell shouldn't be a first-round pick. I don't think he will be. The only two I could even fathom is like Willis, if you just love his skill set and potential, because he's raw. But I think Corral's the best quarterback in the draft.
I agree.
I'm with you there too on Corral.
I think
he's the only first-rounder in this draft.
Yeah, but
who should be.
All the GMs are going to tell you, well, what about all these other cats out there? And then someone's going to talk themselves into 2nd-round pick Carson Strong. Here we go.
Or Desmond Ridder. I've seen some people say Desmond Ridder is climbing the board. He's the best. I've seen so many things about like Pickett's the best quarterback. And then you have like Colin Cowherd, who's probably talking to the Chargers GM, because I think he said he's talked to him before, said, I had a long tenured GM tell me he's a 3rd-round pick, yet people are saying he's the best quarterback. And then you have Willis. You have some people saying he's a 3rd-round pick, or, you have to take him to, like, I've seen some people say he should go 2nd. Like, I'm like, what? I mean, the quarterbacks are all over the place, but I would take Corral. I think his ceiling's the highest. He's really good with RPOs, so I would take him, but they're going to overdraft the hell out of these quarterbacks, and it's going to be fun.
They always do.
For I know a lot of Falcons fans probably watch. Just tank for Bryce and get the best player you can at 8. That's what I would do for you guys.
I mean, that division's fascinating because all 4 teams kind of need their future quarterback, considering Tom Brady's age, and so which one bites on it when, and who hits, and then who has to keep going back to the well the next 2 and 3 years.
Yeah, God, it didn't have to be that way for the Falcons either. That's the craziest part about the whole thing. It just didn't have to be that way, and here they are. It was going to be a bad year no matter what, whether it was with Matt Ryan or not. But man, they are such a dumb organization from the top. I mean, just
Jameis Winston's the 2nd best quarterback in the division, right?
Mariota isn't dead last, which is also saying something. Who do the Panthers have? Darnold? Oh, man.
Darnold. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Ooh. You're right. Yeah.
Because look at the AFC. What was it? The AFC West? They have 4 the top 10 quarterbacks. I think the North has Burrow, Watson, and Lamar. And then the Steelers are always good, and they're the one team that
they won't be with Trubisky. Don't worry about it.
And they'll still win 9 games somehow.
Well, we were way off the rails of Georgia talk, and we got into some NFL draft stuff. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up? I appreciate y'all letting me hop in for Paul and kind of take the reins of the show, but this is y'all's deal, and I'm happy to join anytime, but do want to make sure that that Paul gets the seal of approval on this because this is his baby.
He doesn't need a seal of approval. He can just hop on whenever and kick him out.
Apparently, he has awful takes, so maybe I improve things a little bit.
Awful takes, awful eating times, right, Jason?
Yeah, he eats after the show, so he waits till about 9 o'clock to eat dinner. It's pretty strange.
I snack after shows like this, but I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks it's normal too. He's always complaining to me about.
He's like, I got a pizza in the oven. I gotta get this going.
Are we worried about his metabolism at all?
Paul. I don't want to hear it out of you.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone for checking us out. We'll get this on our podcast feed as well. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you haven't, we are either right there at it or about to be the largest Georgia Bulldog-centric YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed to help us out with that. For Ben Bachmann and Jason Butt, I'm Dayne Young. Thank you for joining us in the UGA Sports Call-In Show. Have a good night.